Hollywood versus history. 5 battles they got wrong and 5 they got right. Hollywood loves war. It loves the clash of steel, the thunder of artillery, the lone hero charging into impossible odds. But history? History is rarely that clean. Sometimes it's mud and miscalculations. Sometimes it's logistics and luck. Sometimes it's a narrow wooden bridge that changes the fate of a kingdom. Here are 5 historical battles Hollywood got wrong. 1. The Battle of Stirling Bridge in Braveheart. A 1995 film starring Mel Gibson and Catherine McCormick is famous for its inaccuracies, most notably the absence of the actual bridge, with the scene instead filmed on an open field in Ireland. The real 1297 battle was a tactical victory for William Wallace and Andrew Moray, who trapped the English army on a narrow bridge. Became a death trap. English soldiers were cut down, trapped between water and Scottish spears. Panic spread. Many drowned trying to escape. The bridge was the battle, and in the movie, it doesn't exist. When it comes to the battle at Thermopylae, the movie 300 is quite far from reality. Release date was March 9, 2007, and features Gerard Butler as Leonidas and Lena Headey as Queen Gorgo. Major historical inaccuracies in 300. Let's start with the fighting force. The movie focuses only on the 300 Spartans, ignoring the roughly 6,000 to 7,000 other Greek allies, Thespians, Thebans, etc., who fought alongside them. What about the attire and armor? Spartans are shown fighting in leather underwear with no armor. Historically, they wore heavy bronze cuirasses, helmets, and greaves, forming a disciplined phalanx formation. The number count of 300. While 300 Spartans died, they were not the only defenders, and they were supported by a massive Greek fleet nearby at Artemisium. The depiction of Xerxes. The Persian king Xerxes is portrayed as a towering, pierced figure, whereas he was a normal-sized man, and the immortals were regular soldiers, not masked ninjas. The chronology and specific events. The line "This is Sparta" actually occurred 10 years earlier when Darius I's messengers were killed, not during Xerxes' invasion. Furthermore, Leonidas was 60 years old, not in his prime as shown. Politics. The film depicts a united Greek front, ignoring that many Greek city-states were warring or sided with Persia. 3. The Alamo. Released in April 2004, featuring Billy Bob Thornton as Davy Crockett and Dennis Quaid as Sam Houston. Director John Lee Hancock revisited the Battle of the Alamo and got it more right than John Wayne did back in 1960. Unfortunately, the 2004 version was still a critical and commercial flop. The image is simple: brave freedom fighters holding out against tyranny. Here are a few major historical inaccuracies in the Alamo. Davy Crockett's end. The film depicts Crockett dying in a blaze of glory while destroying a cannon. Historically, his death is unknown. Evidence suggests he was likely captured and executed shortly after the battle, rather than dying in the heat of combat. Final battle timing. The final assault took place in the pre-dawn darkness, around 5 to 6 a.m., and lasted about 30 to 90 minutes, not in broad daylight as often portrayed. Jim Bowie's death. Bowie did not die fighting outside his bedroom. He was likely killed in his bed, sick with pneumonia. The line in the sand. There is no solid historical evidence that William Travis drew a line in the sand for defenders to cross. Fictional character. Smitty, played by Stephen Bruton, did not exist. There is a White House reference in the movie. A character refers to the White House in 1836, but the Executive Mansion was generally known as the President's Palace or House until the 20th century. Pearl Harbor, released back in May 2001, starring Ben Affleck as Captain, Rafe McCauley and Kate Beckinsale as Nurse, Lieutenant Evelyn Johnson. Pearl Harbor turns the attack on Pearl Harbor into a sweeping love story wrapped in explosions. The attack itself was devastating. Over 2,400 Americans killed. But the film inserts fictional fighter pilots into nearly every critical moment, creating the illusion that a handful of heroes shaped the battle's outcome. The filmmakers chose to adorn Affleck's Spitfire plane with RF, the insignia of the N-303 Polish fighter squadron, although he was flying a British plane. Early-era crop dusters. In one of the film's childhood scenes, a Stearman biplane crop duster appears in what is meant to be the year 1923. However, these special aircraft weren't in use in the U.S. until a year later in 1924, when they first operated as commercial planes for cotton dusting. Incorrectly timed events. One of the most obvious and crucial errors in the film is seen when Admiral Kimmel is notified that an enemy submarine was under attack. During the actual events that took place at Pearl Harbor, Kimmel wasn't notified until hours after the attack ended. He instead heard of what was taking place only once the Japanese bombs had already fallen into the harbor. Those cigarettes were fakes. Did you notice characters smoking Marlboro Lights in the film, and Dan Aykroyd wearing rimless glasses? Neither of these items were available in the 1940s. Those were the wrong Hawkeyes. Pay close attention during the control tower scene. You'll spot E-2 Hawkeyes flying in the background. Though these airplanes did exist and were used in the U.S., they weren't around in 1941. The E-2 Hawkeyes didn't fly until the 1960s. Warships missing their war paint. Typically, in times of war, a nation's ships were painted gray in an effort to help them camouflage against the colors of the oceans they sailed. However, in Pearl Harbor, the Queen Mary appears in all her colored glory, decorated in red, black, and white rather than gray. Because the Queen Mary was an English ship arriving from Britain, who had been part of the war for 2 years, she should have been painted gray long before appearing in the film's events. In reality, confusion ruled. Aircraft were destroyed on the ground. Anti-aircraft guns fired wildly. 5. Black Hawk Down is a 2001 American war film directed and produced by Ridley Scott and co-produced by Jerry Bruckheimer, from a screenplay by Ken Nolan. Black Hawk Down powerfully portrays American soldiers during the Battle of Mogadishu. Its tactical realism is praised. But some key errors include downplaying the critical role of Pakistani and Malaysian forces and using incorrect gear like modern knee pads and featuring dummy rifles with flopping barrels. Key inaccuracies in Black Hawk Down include multinational roles ignored. The film largely ignores the critical support provided by Pakistani and Malaysian forces, who suffered casualties, and instead focuses almost exclusively on the U.S. side of the conflict. The Mogadishu Mile. In reality, the Mogadishu Mile did not happen exactly as portrayed. Soldiers did not run the entire mile to the soccer stadium on foot. They reached armored vehicles that transported them to the rendezvous point. Technical and gear errors. Delta Force operators are shown with modern, post-1993 style knee pads rather than the period-accurate gear. Weapon errors. Some Humvees featured dummy guns with barrels that flopped around. Ammunition mistakes. Many scenes show dummy rounds, live bullets without powder, rather than the crimped blank rounds used in training or simulated combat. Equipment incompatibility. A character is seen trying to use an AK magazine with an M16, which is impossible due to different ammunition sizes. PFC Blackburn did not fall during a fast rope deployment, but rather from a moving helicopter due to sand blindness. And he did not arrive in Mogadishu just before the battle as suggested. The film only briefly mentions that 1,000 to 2,000 Somalis were killed, compared to 18 Americans, a figure that has been debated and, for some, underrepresents the total casualties. Filming location errors. Scenes in the base mistakenly feature May Eden bottled water, an Israeli brand unlikely to be supplied to U.S. troops in Somalia in 1993. Despite these inaccuracies, the film is often considered a faithful, though dramatized, representation of the chaotic battle. 5 battles Hollywood got right. 1. Saving Private Ryan, released in 1998, directed by Steven Spielberg, starring Tom Hanks as Captain Miller and Matt Damon as Private Ryan, follows a group of soldiers, led by Captain John Miller, on a mission to locate Private James Francis Ryan and bring him home safely after his 3 brothers have been killed in action. The opening 25-minute D-Day landing scene of Saving Private Ryan depicts the Normandy landings with unprecedented realism, which many veterans found overwhelmingly realistic, leading to a trauma hotline being established. There was a massive amount of disorientation, fear, and men getting cut down instantly. Veterans described it as the closest any film had come to capturing Omaha Beach. 2. Stalingrad is a 1993 German anti-war film directed by Joseph Vilsmaier. It follows a platoon of German army soldiers transferred to the Eastern Front of World War II, where they find themselves fighting in the Battle of Stalingrad. The film accurately depicts the hellish conditions, lack of winter supplies, and the brutal rat warfare, close-quarters combat, in the factories. It generally portrays the German command structure, the role of NCOs, and the tactical, small unit movement of soldiers. The film also shows the gradual transformation of soldiers from confident warriors to broken, demoralized survivors, accurately capturing the despair of the Sixth Army's final days. It accurately shows frostbite, starvation, hopelessness, decay. 3. Hacksaw Ridge. Released in 2016 and directed by Mel Gibson. Starring Andrew Garfield as Desmond Doss and Vince Vaughn as Sergeant Howell, Hacksaw Ridge tells the story of Desmond Doss during the Battle of Okinawa. A few key accuracies include heroism on the ridge. Doss did, in fact, stay behind on the Maeda escarpment, rescuing an estimated 50 to 75 wounded men by lowering them down the cliff. Conscientious cooperator. Doss was a Seventh-day Adventist who refused to carry a weapon or work on Saturdays, leading to severe bullying and isolation from his unit. The rescue method. The scene where Doss repeatedly asks God to help me get one more, while lowering soldiers, is based on true events. Injuries. Doss was injured by a grenade and later shot by a sniper, similar to his on-screen injuries. Sometimes reality outdoes fiction. Number 4. Letters from Iwo Jima. Released in December of 2006. Letters from Iwo Jima, directed by Clint Eastwood, tells the story of the Battle of Iwo Jima between the United States and Imperial Japan during World War II. As told from the perspective of the Japanese who fought it, it realistically portrays the brutal, hopeless conditions, the innovative tunnel warfare strategy, and the cultural conflicts such as the tension between strict, traditional officers and conscripted soldiers. It's restrained, human, grounded in letters and documented strategy. It restores complexity. 5. We Were Soldiers. Released in 2002. Directed by Randall Wallace, starring Mel Gibson as Hal Moore, Sam Elliott as Sergeant Major Basil Plumley, and Madeline Stowe as Julie Moore, is a compelling war drama that depicts the true story of the first major battle between the United States and North Vietnamese forces. It is a film about uncommon valor and nobility under fire, loyalty among soldiers, and the heroism and sacrifice of men and women both home and abroad. The film accurately portrays Lieutenant Colonel Hal Moore's leadership, the reliance on helicopter air mobility, and the superior, yet often overwhelmed, firepower of U.S. forces. The movie is based on the book We Were Soldiers Once and Young, and focuses on the first major battle between the U.S. Army and North Vietnamese Army, NVA. The film is often lauded for its respectful and gritty portrayal of the war. My conclusion is, Hollywood isn't a history book, it's storytelling. Sometimes that means condensing time, simplifying motives, creating heroes. But sometimes, when done carefully, it preserves memory. The difference between getting it wrong and getting it right often comes down to one question. Is the story serving drama, or is it serving truth? Because real battles don't need embellishment. They were dramatic enough.